the Bible. Today we're doing the book of Isaiah. It's also Palm Sunday. Jesus came through the building today. It was epic. Who knows a lot about the book of Isaiah? I feel like Isaiah is a tough one in that it's a big old book. It's a big old book of prophecy. Oh, thank you. Yes, appreciate that. And it's just like there's a lot in there, and people reference it a lot, but I feel like it's not a book that gets read straight through very often.
Yeah, it's a very reference.
But it is a very highly referenced book. There's a lot of prophecy about Jesus. It's a very important book. So we're starting now. We should do a whole timeline week, I feel like. Maybe at the end of the Old Testament. Because I was looking through and I found like Isaiah in 2 Kings. So literally Isaiah, as far as timeline, gets put in like 4 different kings. One of them being Hezekiah, who's super important. So basically, like we said, before we enter the poetry section, we've basically moved through the whole history of the Bible, right? Of the Old Testament, sorry. And we've gone through, we had the kings, right? And then David and all his sons and the split of the northern and southern kingdoms. And then Assyria took the northern kingdoms, and then Babylon took the southern kingdoms, and they went over to Babylon. And Esther happened then, right? And then they come back. So we've got Nehemiah and Ezra recounting their return, and then rebuilding the temple and all that. And that's where we're kind of left. So all the prophecy books that we're about to enter now happened during the history we've already covered. Okay? So we're not going further into Old Testament timeline. We're kind of looking back, and these are the prophets that were working during all those kings, right? We had like all the good kings and the bad kings. And so some of these prophets are northern kingdom prophets, some of them are southern. Isaiah ministered in Judah. So is he northern or southern kingdom? What? Southern, yes. So basically the southern kingdom is Judah and Bethlehem, right? Or Benjamin, sorry. And then the northern kingdoms are the other 10. That's all right. So the southern kingdom is the one who had some good kings. What was it? 8 versus 12? 8 good, 12 bad, generally. And the northern kingdom had how many good kings? 0. Goose egg. No good kings. 20 bad kings, I believe. So Isaiah happens during 4 different southern kingdom kings. There are 4 different kings are referenced. It's interesting. The Bible Project has 2 videos on this today. So we're going to try to watch them both. But you know how that goes. So I'm going to try to watch one here right at the beginning and one later. But first, Isaiah is mostly widely accepted as the author, at least of most of it. There are some people, the Bible Project references this, that talk about this last section that seems to be written from a post-exile perspective that would put it outside of Isaiah's lifetime, possibly written by his followers. But it's also prophecy. So God was giving him these words. Like, what's the first 2 words in this book? The vision. So Isaiah was having visions and being given these words of prophecy. So why couldn't God have given him post-exile perspective prophecy? So I don't put a lot of stake in that. I think it all could have been Isaiah, but I also don't have a problem if it was his followers, because God uses all kinds of people to write his Bible. It doesn't have to be Isaiah because he was the coolest one, but I think it's okay to go with probably Isaiah. I don't have a problem with just because it's from a sounding different timeline perspective. But it could have been his followers too. Anyway, so that's why there's a question mark. Isaiah's name means the Lord is salvation. It is poetic literature. Okay?
Poetic, prophetic literature.
I don't know if that's a real term or if I came up with it, but I was like, this is prophetic literature. And then I was looking, I was like, oh, it's also poetic. So it's poetic, prophetic literature. Is that an actual genre? I don't know, but that's what it is. It's also historical. There's a couple of historical chapters that just recount kind of actually the prophecy coming true. Now, audience, people of Judah, southern kingdom, thank you. When and where? Jerusalem and Judea. If you only place it in Isaiah's lifetime, we're 739 to 686 BC. If you were to place it with his followers writing some of it, it would be later, post-exile. So here's the 4 kings. So it starts with the death of King Uzziah and goes to the king Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, like we mentioned. Hezekiah was a really good king. He when the northern tribes were being attacked by Assyria, they wanted to attack the southern kingdoms too, but he sought after the Lord, and the Lord helped him, and they resisted the Assyrians and lasted for longer. Main characters, Isaiah. Also, he had 2 sons whose names are cool. Their names are kind of prophetic.
Is that a name for children this?
Sher Jazhub. Sher Jazhub. It means the remnant shall return. So part of it, he named his kids in prophecy, right? The remnant shall return. What is that a prophecy of?
Daniel's time? Or
After Daniel's time. I mean, like Ezra's and Nehemiah's time, yeah. The remnant shall return back to Jerusalem. And what's the other one? Mer shall has Baz. Mer shall hash Baz. Quickly to the plunder, it means.
I nicknamed Marshall.
That's what we'll name our next baby.
Next child's gonna be named
Mayor shall hash Baz. Yeah, that sounds like Marshall. Quickly to the plunder, that means. So that's talking about when they got ravaged by the invaders. So this was at a time when, all those good and bad kings were hit and miss. What was the job of a prophet at those times?
Speak for God.
To speak for God. So if the people are not following after God, he has some important messages to share about follow after God, seek after God, turn from your worshiping the idols, turn from your wicked ways, or this is going to happen. So he's prophesying a lot of the destruction and judgment that is coming. So here's here's an interesting nugget from the book of Isaiah. How many chapters are in the book of Isaiah?
a lot.
66.
66. What else has 66 something?
Revelation.
Satan. 666. One more 6. All right. The whole Bible has 66 books. Now, disclaimer, I don't know how much stake you want to put into this, but it's pretty cool, okay? 66 books in the Bible, 66 chapters in Isaiah.
But
People say, exactly, that's the problem. The chapters came later. Were they inspired? Were they not? I usually think not. But why couldn't have God also orchestrated this? Sure, I'll give it to him. It's pretty cool. It's not just that, though. How many books are in the Old Testament? Come on, Awana kids.
36. I
No.
was going to say 28.
Old Testament.
27. 28 is
No,
New
that's
Testament.
New Testament as 27. 39! 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 books in the New. So, what would you expect if this book is a mini Bible to happen around chapter 39 and 40?
Switch to new.
It will switch genre, or it will switch messages, right? Because the New Testament has a very different message than the Old Testament, right? Jesus is coming. Oh my goodness, look at chapter 40, which is the equivalent of Matthew.
Comfort for God's people.
Comfort for God's people. So the first 39 chapters are judgment prophecy and some history at the end that talks about what happened to Hezekiah. The last 27 chapters is salvation and hope prophecy. Okay? So it does change messages just in line with the Bible. It's pretty cool. It even has verses, it lines up with Matthew pretty well. Look at this. A voice says, cry. And I said, what shall I cry? A voice crying in the wilderness. I lost it. Oh no, verse 3, sorry. A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight for the desert is a highway for our God. Who is that?
Jesus.
Who is that referencing? Who said that in the New Testament? John the Baptist. So, as we switch this messaging in this book with Old Testament and New Testament, lines up chapters, there's a whole bunch of other things I read, like, oh, this one's like Genesis, and this one's chapter 2 is like Exodus.
Weird.
There's some connections there. Again, don't put your whole stake in the Bible's accuracy into this because it's not perfect. But I think it's kind of cool. It's so they say no, this lining up everything and being like, oh, this book's just like Leviticus. No, it's not necessarily. I think it's pretty cool and it's interesting. Isaiah is almost like a mini Bible. But it's totally prophetic. It's years before the Bible would have been completed. So if God was involved in this, it's kind of neat. I think he was involved in it, and maybe, but even in the numbering and the lining up of things. Sure. It's kind of cool. All right. Let's go to the Bible Project first section so we can try to fit them both in.
Purpose.
Oh. So there's a lot in Isaiah. That's why they split it into 2 videos. We're going to try our best to do it in 1 week. So what did you guys notice in that section?
I like
Who do you think the seed is?
There's an interesting
I
one
wonder
called the
who.
green ember, and they have a seed that smolders too. It's called the mended wood.
Huh.
I wonder who it could be.
Well, what is Nazareth known
I
as?
read that book. I know what you're talking
Bread.
about.
What is Nazareth town where Jesus grew up known as? Anybody?
A seed. A branch.
Shoot town. It's like
Okay.
branch town.
Branch.
So like a branch of Jesse will come from Branch Town, Nazareth. So yes, it's all Isaiah's awesome. Like the thing that I keep reminding myself is Isaiah, like we read it and it's after all these events have happened because we've read through the whole history of these events. But Isaiah was writing all this in prophecy, predicting that these things were going to happen, predicting that Assyria was going to come, predicting that Jerusalem would stand against Assyria, predicting that Babylon would take Assyria, predicting that this is amazing because it's prophecy. We get to look back and see it all played out. But this was all written earlier. So the purpose of this book, I think, to call the nation of Judah back to God, which at the same time, even Isaiah knew that it was just going to harden the hearts of the people and judgment was coming anyway, but he was still calling them back. And actually, I think, we see in God's timing, like his judgment is coming, like with Hezekiah. His judgment is coming. Hezekiah didn't keep it from coming, but because he turned to God, he delayed it from coming and had another generation. And that happens with a few different kings. They delay the judgment. Just also that little boy king, what's his name? Josiah. He also delays the judgment of coming because he follows after God. But he doesn't stop it from coming. And that's really an interesting thing to think about, like in God's timing and his mercy towards us. And, like, why hasn't Jesus come back yet? It's his patience and his mercy, waiting that more people would come to know him, delaying his judgment, right? Like, so it all is interesting in how it plays out. So he's calling the nation of Judah back to God, even though it's also hardening their hearts. God knows it is, but he's speaking the truth and telling the prophecy. And also, the bigger, grander purpose, right? Because this is for more than just Isaiah's generation, to tell of God's salvation through the Messiah. So that's coming. His salvation through the Messiah, this hope for not just Jerusalem, like you saw. It was the judgment and hope for Jerusalem, the judgment and hope for the nations, right? It was Jesus is coming to save the whole world, not just Jerusalem. So judgment prophecy is 1 through 39 in our outline. And then 1 through 12, judgment and hope for the nations. We'll go with what they put in the whatever it's called, Bible Project. They outlined it this way: judgment and hope for Jerusalem, 1 to 12. 13 to 23 is judgment and hope for the nations. And then 28 through 29 is the rise and fall of Jerusalem. So that's kind of the section that has some history. It's not all prophetic. It actually recounts what happens because basically Isaiah prophesied these events and then got to see them played out for a lot of them. He didn't get to see the Messiah, right? He didn't get to see the return of Jerusalem, but he did get to see the destruction. So he gets to see it played out. Now, our second section, we're going to call that the salvation and hope prophecy, because salvation and hope is coming for all nations. So that's 40 through 66. So that's like the New Testament part of this book. Salvation and hope prophecy. And then there's just, real quickly, there's just 3 sections, and Chelsea will put it up on the board. 40 to 48 is the announcement of hope. 49 through 55, the servant fulfills God's mission. And 56 through 66, the servants inherit God's kingdom. So, I want to talk a little bit about the messianic prophecy, the prophecy of Jesus. What's one of the most important Christmas time prophecies that Isaiah has? Does anybody know it? Yes.
For behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear son.
Yes. Isaiah actually prophesies the virgin birth. That's in Isaiah 7:14. You can look at it. Isaiah 7:14 prophesies before the Lord will give you a sign, right? Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and call his name Emmanuel, which means, what does Emmanuel means? I said it in the video. God with us. So God, this is prophesying Jesus' birth and the circumstances of his birth. It'd be a virgin birth. This is the sign. This is the marker. Look for this, it's saying. And this is what? 600 years before Jesus is born? So that's pretty cool, right? Yes.
The sermon, the communion verse, is the Matthew one where it says, "And you shall call him Emmanuel, God."
Oh! Connections! I love it. I love it when that works. That's awesome. Thank you, Delane. Delane and I don't meet about these things and plan these things, by the way. That's the Lord.
It's just the Lord.
Yeah. What's the other big messianic prophecy about probably, this is Good Friday, Easter time. There's a whole chapter that's messianic prophecy. Any idea? Any guesses? He was wounded for our transgressions. Isaiah 53, turn there.
I just think it's crazy that people like the Jews, they have all this prophecy and they have all this, and
you know what?
They
That's
deny
interesting.
Jesus.
I agree with that, and I used to be like, what? Why didn't they get this? It's all prophesied. Hindsight is a beautiful thing.
Well,
that
I'm saying
really.
now. I'm saying right now.
Oh, right now, even.
I'm saying right now. They have all this prophecy. They've seen what happened to Jesus, and they are still denying.
Correct. I think that is a big miss. They have missed it big. I give them more credit, to see it before it happens, because you read through Isaiah. It's hard to make these connections,
yes.
Especially if they haven't happened yet.
Yeah. Well,
right?
I'm saying more like now.
And they didn't have Bibles or scrolls of their own. They're just hearing. I mean, they had a lot memorized, but they didn't have it.
Yeah, they didn't have it like we have, and the resources we have. They also don't have the hindsight to be like, see, that's Jesus' birth. And see, this is what happened to Jesus. In chapter 53, he was despised and rejected by man, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, this whole chapter.
Yeah, 53 is.
Even actually into 15:2, it starts prophesying about Jesus' life. Probably most popular here is verse 5. He was wounded and to verse 7. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. With his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have, this is one of verses, you guys have memorized this. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have each turned to his own way. And that rhymes. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, a lamb that was led to slaughter. So these are things that are referenced even in the Gospels when he's before Herod, right? And he doesn't talk and things like that, right?
That's what the Ethiopian
Yes.
ruler was reading.
The Ethiopian eunuch was reading Isaiah and be like, who is this about? And then, was it Philip that got to talk? Philip shows up, is like, here, let me explain it to you. This is Jesus. So the gospel is in Isaiah, which is pretty cool. This is the story of Jesus, his good news, his forgiveness for us is in Isaiah. So that's really, really awesome. So that's the section. Jesus is in it? Yes. Yes, Jesus is in it. He's prophesied in it. You can put down those two that we talked about. Isaiah 7:14 and Isaiah 53 are direct pointing, but the whole book is this looking forward to the hope of a coming Messiah. Referenced as his servant, referenced as this Emmanuel, so much Jesus in this book, which is so cool, 600 years before Jesus came. Let's do Isaiah 53:5. I chose that as the key verse, but he was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that has brought us peace was upon him. By his wounds we are healed. There's a lot of key verses you could choose, but I chose that one. And then timeless truth. The Messiah is the answer. The Messiah is the answer is what I put down. Any other thoughts? Because they're all looking. There's all this judgment coming. There's all this terrible things happening. But what are we looking for? You could put the Messiah, the servant, is our hope. You could put down as a timeless truth too. Everything rides on Jesus. I love that about this book of Isaiah. Is even though there's all these crazy things happening in history, it's so forward-looking to Jesus and the hope. It's stretched throughout this. It's not just this one chapter, 53, which is a huge one, but it's all through, right? Any other timeless truth thoughts? Oh, I said the Messiah is the answer. The Messiah is the answer. That's what I put down. All right. We're going to end this video here. We're going to watch the second half of the Isaiah video. It's shorter today, but that's okay because of the doubled up on the Bible Project. They do a really good job of laying it out, so I'm not really getting into the nitty-gritty of it. So, go watch the Bible Project's video on this.